Hi, Ruth, Jordan, and Professor. This is Raquel Petit, and that's the part I was responsible for in my group. Group number 2, environmental causes of the achievement gap. And I'm going to talk about community, racism, and individual differences. My last video was too long, so I could not upload. I have to keep this video shorter than 15 minutes. I'm sorry about it, okay? So I decided the way I chose, I'm going to have some citations and I'm going to make comments on it. Hopefully that's okay. So the first citation I chose is America is a diverse society in which educational differences have the potential to become a progressively larger source of inequality and social conflict. Many people now recognize that eliminating these differences has become a moral and pragmatic imperative. I think more than ever in what we are living, the situation we are living today, we can witness these inequalities. America is definitely diverse, is a country made by immigrants, and we do have to offer everyone equal opportunity. So I do like this citation by Murphy, citing Miller, 1995. This is just, I'm going to show some pictures. It's can be related to the US or not. In this case, it is not. It's from a different country, but just so you know that, just to highlight that this happens in the world, is not only here, and many people are fighting to have equality in their classrooms and provide safer schools. So environmental factors that impede learning. So I think we've been discussing a lot poverty, and I think unfortunately everything in life when it comes to education, we gotta have money. If you don't have money, you don't have the same opportunities that some people do. So I'm gonna talk first about community. I think community plays a very important role, and the development of a person, right? So that's Bronfenbrenner in his ecological systems theory talks about that. First the individual and then the community when you were talking about the systems, when the microsystems. So community plays a very important role in our lives. And I like to work with definitions first, so it reminds me what I'm talking about. Number 1, a group of people living in the same place or having a particular characteristic in common. Number 2, a feeling of fellowship with others as a result of sharing common attitudes, interests, and goals. I do agree with the definition number 1. Yes, so that's a group of people that we are living, and we are living basically in the same situation when we are in a community. Now about number 2, so a feeling of fellowship. So that is a feeling of fellowship with others, but not always as a result of sharing common attitudes. We can be different in a community, definitely, and have different interests and goals. That happened with me. I was in a very bad community, but I turned out okay. And many of my friends, unfortunately, they didn't. And here also we have to think about where our students are coming from, especially because we teach English language acquisition, or ESL, English as a second language, and many of our students are coming from very poor communities. Many haven't had the opportunity to have education, so we have to take all of these facts into consideration when we are teaching. And we have a big group, and in this big group of everybody together, we have to get them to the same level to pass the same standardized test. So it's a very huge, big, difficult, challenging task. Community. Neighborhood resource theory holds that the quality of local resources available for families and their children affects developmental outcomes. Analysts maintain that low-income and African-American children are disadvantaged because their communities have fewer institutional and other social resources such as libraries and parks. Definitely true. Unfortunately, poor neighborhood, bad communities, they don't have the same sources that people have. And I don't think it's only African American that can happen in any poor community, not specifically African American. And unfortunately, I found this article that said that the resurrection of American Islams, after falling in the 1990s, the number of poor people living in high poverty areas has been growing fast. And I think, I don't know, this number may grow. But I also think that, as it says here, Miller said communities can exercise influence on the friendship youngsters form or their peer groups. And this could go to the good way, or this could go to the bad way. So I think that there are lots of community workers, many people that are there to help. Fortunately, I have fantastic friends. I related to people that helped me with my education. They were my models too. So that makes a big difference. Also, the environment in your home, although I was poor, my parents were very poor, they prioritize our education and told us that education would take us anywhere. Community. To close the loop between community and learning, we note first that community through these various pathways is expected to influence schooling. For example, children who live in a high poverty zone are likely to attend schools with high concentrations of disadvantaged children. Thus, neighborhood has a good deal to do with the degree of class, race segregation, and the school level. Also, there is evidence that the neighborhood surrounding America's diverse schools affected the quality of those schools by shaping both input and process factors. Unfortunately, that's a very sad factor, and that happens. The second thing I would like to talk about is racism. And I will bring again the definition for racism: prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against someone of a different race based on the belief that one's own race is superior. And when I talk about racism, I'm not talking only about this color skin, the skin of your color. I'm also talking about religion. I'm talking about the looks, the way you are, so everything, and the gender you chose to have. That's also racism. So again, America is a country of immigrants, and we deal with these immigrants in our classrooms, and they are looked down, which is very sad, and they fight the racism, believe it or not, if you don't want to face it, but it is there. So they have something to fight. They are already in disadvantage when they start. That's what I think. Here I have some examples of situations in which racism, discrimination happen. And I found this very nice article called The Stress of Racism Affects Learning. A team of researchers found that the psychological response to race-based stressors, be it perceived racial prejudice or the drive to auto-perform negative stereotypes, leads the body to pump out more stress hormones in adolescents from traditionally marginalized groups. Definitely true. I think that is, and stress. I didn't live in a community that I have that stress. I didn't live in a ghetto, but I'm Black, and through education, I climbed the mountains, and every time I was on the top of that mountain, I looked, and I was almost the only one there. And many times I had to perform 3 times more so people could see me like everybody else. So that is this stressor on when I am in front of people, when I am in a classroom. I don't want to disappoint. I shouldn't feel that pressure. It's normal. We can make mistakes, but in my mind, I cannot make mistakes. So, yeah, I think racism unfortunately exists, and it should be stopped. And I think as educators, we are important. We have a very important role in it. Closing the achievement gap two views from current research by Eric Digest. I found this article in this journal that I thought was very interesting. So there are these two studies. They study number one. The first study concluded that schools should never assume systematic group level differences in student effort or motivation, and that schools should identify and respond to particular groups' specific skill and knowledge deficit problems, provide encouragement routinely, and offer more educational resources and learning experiences. So I think that it's a matter of motivation. It's a matter of what we give that the people are going to respond to. Study number two, the second study found that many African American students did not consider schooling preparation for future job success. They felt depreciated and misrepresented in the community despite appearances of racial harmony. Whites considered the achievement gap due to social class, while blacks considered it due to racism. I think racism can also go both ways. That is the racism of black against white. So this is a different discussion. But I think not only for African Americans, but for all our students, we have to have in mind that what we teach them, it has to be meaningful and has to prepare them, and that they are represented, and that we are fair with what we are offering to everyone. African Americans were unengaged in attitudes and behaviors needed for school success. They recognized that need for effort to meet high academic standards, but chose not to make the effort. They were often not educated in honors or advanced placement classes because they had been assigned to less academically rigorous tracks in lower grades. So that's something very important for us to think about. That cannot happen. And then the last one is the individual differences. So the definition, many of a learner's personal characteristics can affect how he or she learns. Individual differences are often explanations for differences in learning and performance among learners. The study of individual differences among learners is done with the idea that results can help educators design instructions that better meets the needs of each learner's needs. I definitely think that we are all capable. On the other hand, we can all have a deficit. Gene problem is not based on race or sex or religion. So we are all capable. We just need to be given the opportunity. I don't believe in this story that's the gene. So while there are controversies about whether differences in academic achievement between racial groups as measured by standardized tests are due in part to differences in ability, no one has found genetic evidence indicating that one racial group has less innate intellectual ability than others. Many behavioral geneticists put forth a different logic. They argue that genetic endowments of ability are key determinants of test scores, and children reared in more affluent families score higher on achievement tests, in part because of genetic endowments passed on from one generation to the next. I really don't think so. I'm sorry, but I cannot believe that. Some scholars are quick to note that if there are differences in intelligence between African Americans and anyone, I would add here, and whites, they are attributable to blacks' history of slavery, segregation, and limited opportunities, rather than to genetics. So that's what I believe. So again, just a reminder, this is the definition of prejudice, and we have to think of that prejudice can be in any situation, like this one, and this one. So to close the gap, in my opinion, by give people, students, the opportunities. Yay, less than 15 minutes. Thank you very much.